If you hold silver, the most dangerous thing in front of you right now is not the price. It is the clock. You have been told, in one form or another, that you need to do something before the next open, before the number drops, before the meeting, before the bell rings, and the market finally makes up its mind. And if you are sitting there right now with your finger hovering over the button, wondering whether to sell before it falls or buy before it runs, I am asking you to stop for just a few minutes, because you are about to make the exact mistake that has quietly cost silver owners more money than any crash ever has. Let me be clear about what this is. This is about your silver, your retirement, the stack you built on purpose, the metals sitting inside the account you already have, the thing you bought precisely because you stopped trusting the paper. And by the end of this, you are going to understand why the people who trade around the next open almost always lose to the people who do nothing at all, and how to tell, honestly, which of those two people you are. There is one question that separates them. One simple question you can ask yourself before you ever touch your position again. I am saving it for the very end, because it is the part nobody on the financial channels will say out loud, and it is the whole game. So let me show you what I mean, and I am going to do it with a true story, because this has happened before, to real people, in a way that rhymes almost exactly with where you are standing right now. Go back with me a little over a decade. There is a man at his kitchen table on an ordinary weekday morning, coffee going cold beside the laptop, the house quiet. He is not a gambler, he is a saver. He had watched the whole financial system nearly come apart a few years earlier, watched the banks get rescued and the printing presses roar to life, and he had done the responsible thing. He had bought gold. He held it through the fear, and he was rewarded because it climbed for years. And for once in his life, he felt like he had seen something coming that all the confident people on television had missed. He would tell his wife, only half joking, that the gold in that account was the smartest thing he had ever done. And then, on one unremarkable day, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, a man named Ben Bernanke, sat down in front of Congress and said something that almost nobody outside of finance would even have noticed. He did not raise interest rates. He did not sell anything. He did not do a single concrete thing. He simply suggested, in careful, hedged, lawyerly language, that at some point in the coming meetings, if the economy kept improving, the Fed might begin to slow down the pace of the bond buying it had been doing. That was it. A hint, a maybe, a someday. And the market lost its mind. They still call it the taper tantrum. Not the taper, the tantrum. Because the taper itself had not even happened. The mere suggestion that the easy money might one day gradually become a little less easy was enough to send a shock through everything. Bond yields jumped, and gold, which had already been wobbling and grinding lower off its highs, began to slide in earnest, one ugly day after another. Now watch the man at the table, because this is the part one needs you to feel, since it is about to be you. He sees the slide. He reads that the Fed is turning. He hears every voice on every channel explaining with total confidence that the party is over, that gold only ever worked because of the free money, and now the free money is ending. So get out. Get out before the next leg down. Get out before the open. And he starts to feel it in his chest, that awful pressure, the sense that sitting still while the number drops is the same as doing nothing while his house burns. So he does the thing that feels responsible, the thing that feels like taking control. He sells. He tells himself he is being disciplined. He's protecting what he has left. He closes the laptop, and he actually feels relief for about a day. That year, gold finished down roughly 28%, its worst year in more than 3 decades. And for a little while, he feels like a genius. He feels like the one who got out in time, the one who was too smart to hold the bag. Here is the part that should stop you cold. The taper he was so terrified of, the event he sold everything to get in front of, when it finally arrived months later, was a non-event. The Fed did begin to slow its buying, right on schedule, exactly as it had hinted, and gold barely flinched, because all the fear had already been wrung out of the price long before the thing actually happened. The market had spent every last drop of its panic on the hint. By the time the real event showed up, there was nothing left to sell. The disaster he braced for turned out to be already over by the time it occurred. Do you see what happened to him? He did not get whipsawed by an event. He got whipsawed by the anticipation of an event. He sold a rumor, and the rumor came true, and it did not even matter. And he was left standing on the sidelines holding cash, staring at a loss he never actually had to take, watching the thing he understood better than anyone slowly climb back without him. That is the whole trap, and it has a mechanism underneath it, even if nobody explains it to you kindly. Metals do not trade on what happens. They trade on what everyone expects to happen. They price the hint, not the event. By the time the meeting arrives, by the time the number prints, by the time the bell rings on the open you have been staring at for days, the move you are bracing for has usually already come and gone, or it never comes at all, because everybody already positioned for it in advance. The people who trade around the open are always one step behind the anticipation. They are pulling on their boots to fight a war that ended before they got to the field. And I am telling you this now, specifically, urgently, because silver just did this exact thing to a whole crowd of people. You watched it happen with your own eyes. Silver got shaken down hard, a fast, violent flush into the mid-50s, its lowest level in the better part of a year, and the same voices came out with the same tired script. It is over. The rally was a fever. Rates are heading higher under the new Fed. Sell before it gets worse. Sell before the open. And a lot of people who had held silver for years, people who were right about the deficit and right about the debasement and right about all of it, did the responsible feeling thing. They sold the flush. They let the drop convince them. And then silver snapped right back towards 60, almost as fast as it had fallen. The bounce rewarded the people who did nothing. It punished the people who reacted. Same trap, brand new decade. The ones who traded around the shakeout handed their metal to the ones who sat perfectly still at the worst possible price, and they told themselves they were being disciplined the entire time they did it. And this is exactly the moment I want to pause, because this is the part that actually touches your money. Think hard about what really happened to that man at the table. He was right. He was right about the whole thesis, and it did not deceive him, because he mistimed a single stretch of weeks and let a headline pry his hands off the thing he had spent a decade building. If you are sitting on $100,000 or more in a retirement account, a 401k, an IRA, anything like that, this is precisely the kind of environment where one panicked decision can quietly undo years of being right. That is exactly why I put together a free retirement protection guide. It walks through, in plain English, how retirees are protecting their savings in a market that whips around like this one, including how some are moving a portion of what they have into physical gold and silver without triggering taxes or penalties held inside the account they already own. Metal they actually hold, not a paper claim they have to trade in and out of. If you are watching this on your TV, just scan the QR code on your screen. If you are on your phone or your computer, go to jeffreedguide.com. And if you go through it and want to talk it over, there is a free, no-obligation, one-on-one educational session for folks with $100,000 or more in any retirement account. No pressure, nothing to buy, just answers. Okay, now let me show you why this trap is built specifically for you and who profits every single time you fall into it. Ask yourself a simple question. Who actually benefits when you trade around every open? It is not you. Every time you sell and buy back, somebody takes a spread. Every time you flinch, a desk on the other side of that trade gets a slightly better price at your expense. The entire machine of financial media, the countdown clocks in the corner of the screen, the what you need to know before the bell, the breathless coverage of a meeting that will be completely forgotten in a week, none of that exists to help you hold. It exists to make you act. Because your calm is worthless to them, and your churn is their whole business. A man who buys silver and forgets about it for 10 years is a terrible customer. A man who trades it every time a Fed governor clears his throat is a gold mine, and not the kind you want to be sitting on. And they are frighteningly good at it, because they are working with the oldest wiring in your brain. When you see something you own start to fall, every instinct you have screams at you to make it stop, do something, anything. Sitting still feels like negligence. It feels like weakness, like you are frozen while the danger closes in. But in this market, sitting still is the entire skill, and reacting is the disease. And the whole apparatus around you is engineered to convince you that the disease is actually the cure. They dress up a distraction as a deadline, and they do it so well that grown, careful, intelligent people sell the bottom and thank them for the warning. Now, none of this means silver is going up. Let me be very careful here, because I am not in the business of telling you a bedtime story. I want you to hold for the right reasons, not because some man on the internet promised you a moonshot. Here is the honest setup, laid out the way the people who study this for a living lay it out. Silver has run a structural deficit for 6 straight years now, the world using more of it than it mines, year after year after year, covering the gap by draining hundreds of millions of ounces out of above-ground stockpiles. And unlike gold, which gets hoarded and mostly still exists somewhere, an enormous share of silver gets consumed and destroyed, burned into solar panels and circuit boards and electronics in flecks far too thin to ever economically recover. Gold is hoarded. Silver is used up and gone. On top of that, China has been draining physical silver at a record pace, its imports surging, its domestic price at one point running at a steep premium to the rest of the world, which is simply the market's way of telling you the metal is being physically pulled east faster than it can be replaced. And the gold to silver ratio, the number of ounces of silver it takes to buy a single ounce of gold, pushed up into the 70s during the shakeout and has been easing back down as silver led on the bounce, which the bulls read as silver being deeply, structurally cheap relative to gold. Put all of that together, and a growing number of serious analysts will make the case that silver belongs far higher than where it trades today. Some point at that ratio and argue that if it simply compressed back toward levels it has actually visited before, and gold merely held its ground near where it is now, the arithmetic alone would put silver in the low hundreds. The boldest voices out there go much, much further than that, into numbers I would treat with real skepticism, because the bigger the target gets, the more it leans on assumptions stacked on top of assumptions. I am not here to hand you any of those figures as a prediction. I am telling you they exist, and that the underlying setup, the deficit, the draw, the ratio, is genuinely real, so that you understand why the metal already in your hands is worth holding on to. But here is the part that actually changes everything, and it is the part almost nobody ever connects for you. None of it tells you what silver does before the next open. Not one bit of it. The deficit does not care about the meeting. China does not stop pulling metal because a number is about to print on a screen. The ratio does not compress on a schedule you can circle on a calendar and trade. All of that is the trend. The open is the weather, and you cannot trade the weather. Nobody can. The man at the kitchen table was completely right about the trend, and he still lost because he tried to trade the weather, and the weather is designed from top to bottom to soak you. So let me keep a promise I made you at the start and be completely honest about the risk, because you have earned that, and because the hype merchants never will. I cannot promise you a price, I cannot promise you a date, and the very moment anyone does promise you either one, you should close the tab and never go back to that person. Silver is the most violent major metal there is. It overshoots wildly on the way up and just as wildly on the way down. It just shook out into the mid-50s and snapped back towards 60 in a matter of days, and it can turn around and do the ugly version of that just as fast. It could stay cheap, it could fall back below where it bounced from and simply sit there, testing your patience for a long time. Even if the bulls turn out to be completely right about where it eventually ends up, the road there can take years, and it can be brutal enough to shake out nearly everyone who was correct but could not bear to sit through the pain. Being right and being early feel absolutely identical while you are living through the drawdown. In the short run, the price does not answer to the deficit or to China. It answers to the Federal Reserve, which under Kevin Warsh has turned hawkish, with a rate hike now a live possibility rather than a cut, and metal that pays you no interest always struggles when rates threaten to climb. The shortage is the trend, the Fed is the weather, and the weather can drench you for a very long time before the trend ever bothers to show up. This is a case for why the setup deserves your respect. It is not a guarantee, and it is not investment advice. So what does a calm owner actually do? Not what does he predict, what does he do with his own two hands when the open is bearing down and everyone around him is losing their nerve? He sizes the position so that a shakeout can never force him to sell. That is the entire secret, and it is boring, which is exactly why nobody tries to sell it to you. If a 50% drop would wreck your life or force you to raise cash at the worst possible moment, then you own too much, and no amount of being right will protect you, because the market can stay irrational a great deal longer than you can stay solvent. Own an amount you can genuinely forget about. He owns the metal itself, not a paper promise on the metal. Because when it truly matters, a claim is only ever as good as the party standing on the other side of it. And the whole reason you came to silver in the first place is that you stopped trusting those parties. And he refuses, absolutely refuses, to sell into the bottom of a flush just because a headline told him the open was coming. He turns off the minute by minute. He checks it rarely. He treats the countdown clocks as exactly the noise they are, and he goes and lives his life. And that brings me, finally, to the one question I promised you all the way back at the beginning. The single question that truly separates the people who hold from the people who get shaken out. The one you can ask yourself before you ever touch your position again. It is not, where is silver going? Nobody alive can answer that honestly, and anyone who pretends to is selling you something. The question is this: can I hold this through another 50% drawdown without being forced to sell? That is the whole thing. That is it. If the answer is yes, if you own an amount that lets you sit through the ugliness and simply do nothing, then the next open is noise. The meeting is noise. The number is noise. And you can let every bit of it wash right over you because you have already won. You have made yourself unshakable. And unshakable is the only edge an ordinary person actually has in this market. But if the answer is no, if the very thought of that drop makes your stomach fall along with it, then you need to understand what that feeling is actually telling you. Your problem was never the open. It was never the Fed or the headline or the timing. Your problem is your size. And the thing to fix before any open, before any meeting, before any bell, is not your conviction, and it is not your timing. It is how much you own, so that you are never again the man at the kitchen table, right about everything, and forced to sell anyway. If you are on your TV, the QR code is on your screen one more time. If you are on your phone or your computer, go to jeffreedguide.com. It costs you nothing to be informed. And here is the honest reason to look now rather than later. The time to make a decision like this calmly, deliberately, on your own terms is exactly when nothing feels urgent, which is right now, not the day everyone is panicking and the open really is bearing down on you. And for those of you who stayed with me all the way to the end, here is something reserved just for you. If you have $100,000 or more in any retirement account, and you mention that you watched this full video, you can claim a free, one-on-one, no-obligation educational wedge conference. A real conversation about your specific situation, about what you actually own versus what you only think you own, with no pressure and nothing to buy. That is only for the people who made it all the way here, and you are one of them. If you are on your TV, scan the QR code on your screen. If you are on your phone or your computer, go to jeffreedguide.com. Grab the guide and take the first step toward protecting what you spent a lifetime building. Because the man at the kitchen table did not lose to the Fed. He did not lose to the taper, which turned out to be nothing at all. He lost to the clock. He let a hint about an event convince him he had to act before the open, and he traded away 10 years of being right for the fleeting feeling of doing something. Do not be him. The next open is not your enemy, and it is not your opportunity. It is a distraction wearing the costume of a deadline. Size it so you can sit still, own the real thing instead of a promise, and let the clock tick. Because the people who win with silver, in the end, are never the ones who watch it the closest. They are the ones who learned how to look away.